What is language? Everybody knows, thank heavens.
Is language simple or is language complex?
The girl that's the house of's father.
Esta é a primeira parte de uma série sobre a linguagem humana.
The question is, how can you learn so much from so little?
The question is, how does a child know what a word is?
How is it that we can so alter our thought patterns to fit into the linear arrangement of any particular language?
I didn't know. Did you know me to ask when he broke up? He did. I thought you had already broke up. No, he broke up with me, so I could break up with him. Isn't that awful?
What specific biological endowment could we have that allows us to do this?
Is there something true, some core of properties true of all human languages?
Tak gniewajcie, rozpazuniemy czajny, kuptaj za jam trochę. Jeżeli
Esta reportagem debruça sobre o estudo de um enigma. Este episódio
people don't think when they speak, they just speak.
Esta reportagem debruça sobre o estudo de um enigma. A linguagem é a mais típica das características humanas. Contudo, a maioria das pessoas não pensa nela. Tradicionalmente, os linguistas têm estudado a história, o vocabulário e a gramática dos idiomas existentes no mundo. Nesta nossa geração surgiram novas ideias que revolucionaram o que se tinha pensado até agora. Hoje os linguistas indagam como utilizamos a linguagem e como é que ela funciona a nível do cérebro humano. Por exemplo, porque é que os vários idiomas têm tantas regras que seguimos sem saber como?
How would you describe this?
Well, I know it's supposed to be a big red balloon.
How about a red big balloon? Could this be a red big balloon?
A big red balloon.
Okay. Do you have any idea why you feel more comfortable saying a big, and you have a sense of why that feels better than a red big balloon?
I have no reason why.
3 big red round plastic balls. Not big 3 round plastic red big balls.
Os linguistas sustentam que a linguagem obedece a regras. Que regras são essas?
Stop and go traffic. It should be go and stop traffic. You can't stop until you've gone.
You can reclimb and you can re-institutionalize, but you can't re-fall down. I don't know why that is. It's peculiar. I mean, why can't you re-fall down?
And you can say things like, don't rouse up the natives, but you can't say don't rouse up them. You have to say don't rouse them up.
Language is untidy. Language is a mess.
That John left surprised me. What's the that doing there? I mean, everybody knows you can't say John left surprised me. There's something wrong with that. The rules of English say you got to have a that in front. Well, why?
Un gros ballon rouge.
Could you do it the other way around?
Un ballon rouge gros.
And is that fine or?
No, it's not. The first one is fine. The other one you just will never say it.
A big red balloon.
Those are just the rules of my language that I learned totally unconsciously as a little child.
It's the same old story.
What's going on here?
It's the old same story?
O que é que nos diz, quem nos diz, como havemos de falar?
The language faculty is a system, a subsystem of the brain, of the human brain. Its major elements don't appear to exist in other similar organisms. and that organ of the brain yields a language under appropriate conditions. It's partially tuned by the environment, but to a large extent it appears to be determined by our biological endowment and hence essentially invariant across the species.
There have really been three major revolutions in modern linguistics. The first, about 200 years ago, was the discovery that sound changes are regular, that you can reconstruct ancient languages and talk about how languages changed from the ancient times to the present. The second was at the turn of this century, where it was discovered that languages themselves are systematic, that there are rules governing how languages are put together. The third revolution came with Noam Chomsky in his book Syntactic Structures in 1957.
In 1957, Chomsky published this little book, Syntactic Structures, and it almost immediately revolutionized the field. It had a profound influence on everyone who read it carefully, and the reason for this is the beauty of the analyses that Chomsky presented. He was able to show that there were patterns when it had just looked like there were many separate facts, and he was able to come up with very simple rules for explaining these patterns.
Basically what Chomsky said is that your sights aren't set high enough. You're asking the wrong questions. You're not asking the most interesting questions. What you're asking is, well, we know language is a system, so how should we divide it up? Where should we draw the line in the word? Where should we draw the line in the sentence? What are the pieces? Chomsky said, let's ask a different question. Let's ask a much more ambitious question. Let's ask the question, what is a possible human language?
What was so appealing about this analysis and what was so revolutionary about it is it showed that there's some process in your head, some rule, some pattern that you have abstractly, and you use this rule in producing sentences and in understanding sentences. That is, he moved linguistics away from merely gathering and investigating sentences that had already been produced and moved it towards the investigation of human potentiality. What kinds of sentences can you produce? What kinds of sentences can you understand?
Once you say, what is a possible human language, in a way you're saying, what is a possible human being? How does the human mind work?
Well,
the most elementary property of human language that one can imagine is that we can create new expressions which express new thoughts. So, for example, the sentences that I'm now producing, the you may not have heard, I may not have said before, maybe they're new in the history of the human race.
Here's something no one has ever said before. Toss that anchor over here. I have room for 2 or 3 more of them in my hip pocket.
The point of a language is to be able to say things you never said before and never heard before, and to understand things the first time you hear them that have never been said before to your knowledge and maybe never been said before at all. But if you're going to be able to say and understand new things, you must have acquired something very general, a system.
There perhaps, in English, there are about 40 sounds. The sounds get combined to form, oh, most people know 40,000 words, something of that sort.
Swimming.
Cacophony.
Anti-disestablishmentarianism.
Lunch. Words are built out of sounds, and there are a limited number of them. Sentences are built out of words, and there's no limit to the number of sentences that you can compose in a language.
You could say that words are like atoms. The way atoms are in chemistry, as the basic building blocks, those are what the words are. They're fairly solid things, and you take these atoms and you put them together to make up the molecules or the sentences.
I remember Senator Joseph McCarthy at one time saying, "That's the most unheard of thing ever heard of." You know, nobody could have invented that sentence before McCarthy spoke it.
It's really a deceptively simple system. The genius of the system is that with a small number of words and this system of grammar, you can make up an infinite number of sentences. You can make up a sentence to fit any occasion.
And Mommy just goes to sleep, but Daddy just go, and Daddy just,
O sistema baseia-se em palavras. Parece muito simples, mas levanta-se a questão: o que é uma palavra? Como é que uma criança sabe o que é uma palavra?
You could ask somebody, what is a word? And most people think they know what a word is until you ask them. A word is
A word is...
And you're trying to find it, and you can't put your finger on it. You don't know.
A word is...
Pencil.
Language. A word is something that someone thought up a long, long time ago.
What is a word? That's actually an extraordinarily difficult question.
I haven't the ghost of an idea. I can't even make up a plausible evasion.
You could say a word is the smallest separate piece of a language that all by itself will have a meaning.
Por outro lado,
there are words that are composed themselves of smaller units that bear meaning, like kicked, where kick has a meaning and id has another meaning, namely past tense.
And I didn't do that. Is it a word?
One of my favorite words is anti-disestablishmentarianism. It's an interesting word, of course, because everybody thinks that it's the longest word in the English language. In fact, there are many words in English that are far longer than anti-disestablishmentarianism, most of them chemical terms.
Okay, here goes. The longest word in Webster's seventh is pneumono-ultramicroscopic silico-volcanoconiosis, a disease of the lungs.
Infixes and prefixes and suffixes.
I used to wonder, pre and suff are prefixes. Suff is the prefix of suffix. Is fix the suffix for prefix and suffix?
Words seem to be somehow indivisible, but you look at them closely and they've got all kinds of little parts to them.
What's this? I know there's a word for this.
I think, for example, of the word apodictic. Now, that is not only a legal phonological structure, I happen to know it's a word because I've seen it in print, and I've even looked it up in the dictionary, but I simply can't remember what it means.
I haven't a clue what apodictic means.
Mujinga, that's my name. I'm from Africa, Zaire. Mujinga means a child born with umbilical cord all over her body.
Most words certainly are complicated words, like human or like generous, are really small, tiny sentences all wrapped up in one set of phonemes.
That's a single Turkish word, one of my favorite words because it comes out as a whole sentence in English. It means, are you one of those that we haven't been able to Europeanize?
One example from the Eskimo language I work with, which is called Alutiq, is the word ayai tao ho jumin tak bungaka, which means, don't you want to go window shopping with me?
An easy thing to say for me, since I deal with computers a lot, is that a word is the sequence of letters between two blanks.
But what about when we speak? We don't have little spaces when we speak. We just run everything together.
O-M-M-I-N-A, omina. It means I am going to.
Mares-y-dotes and dozy-dotes and little larsy-dive, a kiddly ivy too, wouldn't you? Mares-y-dotes and dozy-dotes and little larsy-dive, a kiddly ivy too, wouldn't you? Somebody's flat.
You know, when you listen to people talk, unless they deliberately pause between the pieces of what they're saying, it all runs together.
How do we know where the gaps are in between the words? Because this all sounds like one whole sound. This is just one long sound to me. But you know that I said this is just one long sound to me.
Why are you weary? Why are you weary? Why are you weary?
I might walk up to you and say, stewing, or chiche.
What do you want to do now?
I don't know. What do you want to do?
Dunno.
An apple? Okay, so will you go home now for an apple? Okay.
I'm going to go get the bus and go home.
This may be the hardest thing that the brain ever has to do, is to figure out those boundaries at the words that people have just run together in speech.
Why are you weary? Why are you weary?
People have invested millions of dollars and Lord knows how many hours in trying to devise machinery that will be able to perform this task of breaking spoken language up into words so that it can be understood. And yet a child, by the age of 1, is perfectly able to understand speech, natural speech, and just pick it apart into words. So what's a word? They're very slippery objects. They're difficult to deal with. Words stand for things. The word tree stands for a tree. But words are more than that. After all, the word tree doesn't just stand for that tree or even any individual tree. It stands for the general notion of a tree, the concept of a tree. That's what Plato would have told us. But then that raises the question of concepts. What's a concept?
O que é que temos na mente antes de falarmos? Haverá conceitos que não temos de inventar, já nascidos connosco? Platão dizia que sim. Chomsky afirma o mesmo.
Well, suppose I have, say, a box, and I have a marble inside the box and a marble outside the box. And I ask which marble is near the box. Well, the answer is that the marble outside the box is either near the box or not near it, but the marble in the box can't be near it. Again, that's one of those simple things that we ought to be surprised about. How does a child know that a marble that's in a box can't be near the box?
Suppose I had a box, and I put one marble outside the box, and I put another marble inside the box. And I asked you which marble is near the box. Which one would you say? Charlie? The one outside, what would you say?
The one outside.
Why?
Because the one outside is really out. The one inside is just like it's inside the box. And also, it isn't even near it. It's touching the box.
Notice if the box is a geometrical object, say a sphere in the geometrical sense, then or a cube, the marble can be near the box. The marble is near the box is the surface. So the geometrical object is the surface. So something inside it can be near it, just as something outside it can be near it. But we don't develop concepts like that naturally. We have to invent them in some other faculty of the mind.
The one outside, because the one inside isn't near. Mm-hmm. It isn't actually that both of them are near. One is near and one is not.
Okay, now which one is it?
Yeah.
The concept of box that we actually develop is a very obscure one. It includes the interior, but it doesn't matter what's inside it. So if the box is filled up with marble or it's just full of air, it's the same box. Our concept of box includes the interior, but it doesn't care what's inside the interior. Now that's an extremely abstract concept, far beyond what any evidence could ever drive. There's no evidence that the child has available that tells the child that the box isn't just its surface. And in fact, if we were to invent a science, we would make it just the surface, as we do in geometry and physics. Now, what that means is that the concept, with all of its incredible intricacy, must be fixed by the mind and just keyed by some trivial fact about the environment.
There she goes. Oh, where did it go? Where's the duck? Where's the duck?
Sabemos automaticamente que uma caixa tem interior, independentemente do que contém. É diabo de conceito.
In everyday conversation, we are enormously creative.
boy, one more minute of those hot lights and I'd be fried shish kebab.
It's almost certain that any 20-word sentence you hear will be a brand new, newly minted, newly created sentence that has never been uttered before, and probably you've never heard it before.
Here's another one no one has ever said before. I'm going over to the softball game and beat up Hitler's widow.
What language is really about is putting the words together into these sentences.
Suppose that it's possible to choose the next word in what you're going to say as any one of 100 words. No, make it even easier. Say any one of 10 words that you can use to continue. So the first word that you pick is one of 10. And now you go on and you say a second word, and it is also one of 10. So the total number of possible combinations of 2 words will be 10 times 10, or 100. Now you go on to say a third word, and there are 10 possibilities there, and that means now we have 1,000 3-word combinations. And if we go on to a fourth word, there will be 10,000. So the number of possible messages is increasing very rapidly as the length of the message increases.
Little hat, and in that little hat, he had a little cat, and in that little cat, he had a little rat, and in that little rat, he had a little mouse.
This is the desk that sits in the office that I worked in. Now we could take that still larger sentence and put it together into a larger sentence still. This is the clutter that's piled on the desk that sits in the office I work in. There doesn't seem to be any limit on that.
How many sentences would we have if we had, say, 20-word sentences? Well, that would be 10 to the 20th power. How big a number is 10 to the 20th power? Well, let's see. To compare it with, there's something like 3 times 10 to the 9th seconds in a century.
He had an eraser, and in that little eraser, there was a clock. And in that little clock, there was a hand.
Period.
One of the basic formal properties that allows for this creativity is the process of taking a sentence and putting it inside another sentence to create a still larger sentence.
That was really long.
There's no longest sentence, and that's why the number of possible sentences is countably infinite.
General Alexander Haig, when he was Secretary of State, once told the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, there is a conscious castration of America's eyes and ears around the world, whatever that meant. But surely nobody could ever have spoken that sentence before Haig, and nobody will ever want to speak it again.
Have a nice day.
Nice talking to you.
Same here.
But what about shorter sentences, 10-word sentences, 5-word sentences?
25 cents, 5 for $1, it takes 2 seconds.
Do you, Lydia, take Raphael and holy matrimony for as long as you both shall live?
Yes.
Of course. Some short sentences can be used over and over and over.
Do you, Carlos, take Raquel in holy matrimony for as long as you both shall live? Do you, Chimeng, take Chunhan in holy matrimony for as long as you both shall live? Do you, Byron, take Aracelis in holy matrimony for as long as you both shall live?
5 for $1, it takes 2 seconds.
As you both have consented in wedlock?
But short sentences can be improbable, too.
Your husband. And kiss your bride. Kiss your bride, Raph. Kiss your bride.
For example, you probably never heard anyone say before, short sentences can be improbable, too.
Okay, Laura and Orlando.
We have a kind of tension operating here. We have a system that is very strict in certain ways, and yet one which allows you many degrees of freedom as long as you stay within the bounds of the system.
Next morning, just before dinner,
you've got words, a finite number of words. You've got a very small number of rules, and Between them, you can make up an infinite number of sentences. That's the system.
Simples.
I got to go. Bye.
The very beginnings of science are always the capacity to be able to be amazed by apparently simple things. For example, if you assume that an apple falls to the ground because that's its natural place, so it's unsurprising, you have no science. If you begin to ask yourself, why does the apple fall to the ground and not rise to the sky? If you allow yourself to be puzzled by that simple fact, well, then you find you have a rather serious question before you, and science begins.
How did sound and meaning ever get linked together? When you think about it, there's really no two things that are more different from each other than sound and meaning. Meaning, the ideas in the brain, to put it in simple terms. Sounds, these things that come out of our lungs and our vocal cords, they're totally different. How did they ever get linked? What biological event could have created this? Well, the biological event was the creation of grammar, syntax. What grammar is a system that allows these mismatched components, sound and meaning, to be linked to each other.
A primeira tarefa da gramática é organizar as palavras em linha umas atrás das outras. Está iminente um invento. Vamos relatá-lo na sua ordem real. Será que existe uma ordem natural nos eventos? Uma mulher caiu do elétrico. Primeiro falamos da mulher, depois do elétrico. Porquê? A mulher veio primeiro? Mas certamente o elétrico já lá estava antes dela cair.
It seems evident, if you compare your thoughts and perceptions to the things that you say, that there's a very direct relationship between what you experience and how you talk about it. But in fact, there's a great mystery. Because when we speak, we have to say things one word after another. We have no choice. That's the way language works. But when we see things or experience things, they don't necessarily come bit by bit in a linear order.
The boy kicks the ball. Which comes first in reality? The boy, then the kick, then the ball? This is one of the puzzles of syntax, that the form of a sentence is often independent of its meaning.
Because boy, ball, and kick can occur in any order in language. In perception, they occur simultaneously.
In fact, the order of the words doesn't seem to have anything to do with the order of events.
But we have to arrange it in one way or another in order to speak about it. One of the major tasks of using language is to take something which is essentially atemporal, nonlinear, and to arrange it in linear patterns in order to make different kinds of points.
A forma de uma frase depende do seu significado.
There's a famous example sentence in linguistics that Chomsky's been talking about since the 50s. Colorless green ideas sleep furiously.
Colorless green ideas sleep furiously.
Well, a small industry has been spawned by one linguistic example, namely colorless green ideas sleep furiously, which has been the source of poems and arguments and set to music and so on.
Colorless green ideas sleep furiously.
This is a very interesting sentence because it shows that syntax can be separated from semantics, that form can be separated from meaning. Colorless green ideas sleep furiously. It doesn't seem to mean anything coherent, but it sounds like an English sentence. If you read it back to front, furiously sleep ideas green colorless, that wouldn't sound like English at all.
Colorless green ideas sleep furiously.
Well, that tells us that there's more to what determines the structure of a sentence than whether it has meaning or not.
If you tried out the sentence in a child, I bet the child would giggle. But I suspect that the reaction would be different if you tried out furiously sleep ideas green colorless. You might get a blank stare instead. For a sentence to be a sentence of English in terms of its structure, doesn't seem to matter much what the words mean or whether they go together in a meaningful way, just that they go together in a way that obeys the rules of syntax.
Syntax, no other animal seems to have it. We have to assume, I think, that something so distinctive, so complex, so much at the basis of human achievement is an evolved capacity.
One term that Chomsky has used a lot is the term universal grammar. And this term flows naturally from the idea that you inherit many of the principles and processes involved in the grammar, your knowledge of your particular language.
There are 5,000, maybe more than 5,000 languages spoken in the world. But in fact, what Chomsky noticed is that these 5,000 languages of the world are really very, very similar.
As human beings, we are naturally interested in the differences among humans. We take the similarities among humans for granted. So we're interested in the way humans look different from one another, and their faces are so different, and their sizes are so different, and the way they behave is so different, and so on. From the point of view of, say, some Martian, we would all look alike, just as from our point of view, all frogs look alike. Now, from the point of view of the frog, frogs look, I'm sure, very much different from one another because they're interested in the differences among frogs. We just notice the overwhelming respects in which they're similar. Now, if we can make the leap of the imagination that enables us to look at ourselves the way we look at other organisms, we will quickly discover that we're remarkably alike.
Mine ear is much enamored of thy note.
In fact, the differences, the existing differences among human languages has in this sense been called by Chomsky trivial. Trivial compared with the differences between the human languages taken together and any other system of communication by other kinds of animals, by intelligent machines, and the like. These are all vastly different from the set of human languages, which by comparison are very, very much like each other.
Loma loma na tomba bakalo loma, tiko kina na vei matangali roka, e uasivia katotoka ko laue loma, isa isa ko loma loma.
There are two major ground plans, two great options in building a language. Relying on the order of words to convey the meaning of your overall thought.
Como no inglês.
Or changing the endings of the words one by one and then shuffling them around.
Como no latim.
For example, instead of counting on order as we do in English, we might do it by saying, Mary A. hit John'em, by which we mean that Mary is clearly the actor, the A word, and John is clearly the one acted upon, the word.
This is simply book in English. Well, in Russian it's kniga if I hold it up and show it to you. But if I say I'm holding it up or I'm reading it, then it becomes knigu rather than kniga. We change the ending because when we're acting on an object, we have to say it differently. These endings are what grammarians call inflections.
You might wonder how many languages use the order ground plan, how many languages use the inflectional ground plan. And it's very, very hard to answer a question like that because every language uses a little of both. In English, for example, we use word order very much, but we still have inflections like the plural S at the end of words is an inflection that signifies the number. Over a period of time in the history of a language, it may change from being a highly inflected language to being a language without inflections, and then change back again.
We see this happening in English now if you think of the ending v on could've, should've, would've. That v isn't a word anymore. It's not have, it's just v. It's becoming a grammatical ending.
Se há de facto características universais nas línguas humanas, Elas deveriam aplicar-se a todas as pessoas em todo o lado, mesmo a um povo antigo como os Walpiri. O seu idioma tem sido estudado de perto. Em qual dos dois planos base se funda?
I'm studying the language of the Walbri people of Central Australia. The Walbri people are the Aboriginal inhabitants of a very vast area of Central Australia.
Mary Loughran, linguista, vive com os Walpiri há mais de 10 anos.
The Walbri language is a very interesting language. Like other Central Australian languages, it has probably been spoken in relative isolation from non-Australian languages, possibly up to 60,000 years. So it makes it very interesting for research for linguists who are interested in finding out about differences between languages, but probably more particularly interested in finding about what is common to human language.
Ainda recentemente os Walpiri eram nómadas. Agora, sediados na cidadezinha de Yuendumu, começam a europeizar-se. Sendo nómadas, dão mais valor ao que podem transportar na mente. Coisas como a linguagem não pesam. As histórias podem ser contadas por desenhos ou por palavras. Apreciam em alto grau o manejo subtil da língua. A pintura de Jacamará conta a história do ciclone, uma lenda pré-histórica da era a que eles chamam o sonho. Os Walpiri têm também uma linguagem gestual, emprega em ocasiões especiais.
Now, nobody speaks a primitive language. All languages are extremely sophisticated. All human language constitutes a very, very sophisticated system.
O Walpiri é uma língua como o latim ou o grego, estruturando a frase com desinências.
That was one word which I just typed into the dictionary there. Walbri is typically a language that has very, very long words made up of many, many meaningful parts. Unlike English, Walbri doesn't rely on the order in which words come in a sentence to convey the sort of meaning that order conveys in English. What Walbri uses instead are little suffixes which go onto a given word and which indicates the role of that word. So, for example, to say the boy kicked the ball in Walbri, we would say something like Wirialo, Pakano, Japu Japu. Japu Japu is the word for ball. Wiria is the word for boy. But to indicate that the boy is the doer of the action, we have an extra little piece on it, which is lu. So we say Wirialo. And then we have the verb Pakano, and then we have Japu Japu. In Walbri, the exactly same message would come across if I changed the order of the words, for example, and said Wirialo, Pakano, Japu Japu. Or Japu Japu, Pakano, Wirialo. Or I could say Pakano, Wirialo, Japu Japu. However, it doesn't matter what order the words are in, exactly the same message will come across that I am saying the boy kicked the ball.
However different languages may seem on the surface, underneath they seem to be cut out of the very same pattern. There are striking similarities of organization. In a way, it's like the human face. Human face is very simple. 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. You can draw a simple sketch of it. But look at the incredible diversity. Each one of us has a uniquely different face, yet each face is obviously a human face. Languages are the same. Each one is obviously a different language, but they're clearly examples of the same kind of system.
One thing you might think to ask, it's actually quite an interesting topic to think about, is just how good is language at doing the job which it's designed to do?
Language serves a great many human purposes, but it can't do everything.
I mean, after all, if it's just a biological adaptation, which is what I'm suggesting, then you would expect that, like other biological adaptations, there would be limits on the fit between the job that it does and the job that it's designed to do.
Suppose I wanted you to meet a friend of mine at the train station. You didn't know this friend, and I didn't have a photograph of him, so I was trying to describe him. And he's about 5 feet 8 inches tall, and he has brown hair and a very ordinary face, and I'm sure he'll be wearing clothes. I don't know how to describe him to you, but perhaps you could meet him anyhow. Would you please?
Something which turns around and comes down.
How can you explain the concept of a spiral? You almost have to make use of a gesture like that.
Can I use my hand? Sure. A spiral.
Like if I say, there's a leafy tree. Well, how leafy is it?
Something that twists around in like rotating circles.
Circular motion that's going, something like a slinky.
How leafy is a tree? If you look at it, you can tell immediately. But trying to describe it, I can't count the leaves and tell you how many there are.
Can one imagine a system that might communicate thought better than natural languages do? Well, certainly for some purposes.
For instance, giving directions to someone. Language is not as good as handing them a map and saying, look, I live here, you go right down like that.
Go down North Harrison Street, the street that you're on now, to Harrison Street, Route 1.
Someone could describe a spiral without using gestures, but it would take a rather complex a series of sentences to do it.
A loop which proceeds in 2 dimensions. It goes rotational component and a component going transverse to that direction.
Make the left, go down, you'll see the state police barracks on the right left-hand side.
Jonathan Winters used to say, well, you go on down about a good 100 miles and take a right.
You travel back about 250 yards. You see a guard booth. You go through that guard booth.
Or is it a left?
The very nature of language design leads to the consequence that there are thoughts, which are perfectly fine thoughts, that are not expressible directly through the mechanisms of language. Language is a system with structure, and any system with structure and design has scope and limits. If it had no intrinsic structure and design, it could do nothing. It could achieve nothing. It would be useless for anything. But the very structure that it has not only provides it with its capacities, but also imposes certain limits on it. So, for example, say take a tool, physical tool, say a hammer. If it was just an amorphous blob, you couldn't do anything with it. If it's a hammer with a particular structure, you can do certain things with it, but you can't do other things with it. If a tool is going to be useful for any purpose, it's going to have structure, and that's going to prevent it from being used for other purposes.
On the other hand, there's a lot of expressive power built into our linguistic capacity that's easy to overlook. I mean, people go around telling you things like, not only do maps show you how to get there easier than you could describe it, but moreover, you know, single pictures are worth thousands of words and all that sort of stuff. In a sense it's true, in a sense it's also not. We can do things of great subtlety with language that it's very hard to imagine doing in any other way.
Much of the subtlety of language, of course, comes from syntax, but there's also subtlety in the words themselves. Words can be associated arbitrarily with anything. We think of them being associated with objects, but they can be associated with ideas, with abstractions, with anything you like. Words can be associated with anything you can think of.
Language is arbitrary. There's no connection between the thing and what we call the thing. It's abstract. You can talk about things that really aren't there, things that have no form. A word like form, for example. Now, what is the meaning of the word form? Or a word like truth, that terrible word that philosophers have discussed for so many thousands of years. What is truth? We don't know. We just have a word for it. It's an arbitrary word.
Love. What does love mean? What's love?
So language is completely arbitrary. Words are arbitrary.
It can be anything you want. That's not a light. That's a Lulu. Turn the Lulu on.
Even little kids know that. So my son, for example, he's 4 years old. He comes down for breakfast. He sits down in his chair and he says, "I want Gump for breakfast." And you say, "Peter, what is Gump?" And he looks and he says, "Gump is cereal."
So, for example, whether I call a tree, or whether I call it, say, a baum, as I would if I grew up in Germany somewhere, that's obviously variable.
The thing and what you call the thing have nothing at all to do with one another.
Dinosaur.
Pancakes.
Infrastructure.
Different languages have totally different vocabularies, different names for the same things, different names for different things, depending on what they use.
Words for camel.
The Arabs have dozens, if not scores of words for camel and lion and horse and other elements of their civilization.
The vocabulary of each language reflects the way of life of the people who speak that language. So people obviously need words that talk about the things they want to talk about.
If you live at the North Pole, bamboo is not important to you.
متقدد is a skinny camel. Halus is a young female camel.
There's got to be a word for everything. Every little piece of this boat has got a different word for it. It's got all these lines here. Each one's got a different name for it.
This particular one is the halyard for the spinnaker. And over here, the halyard for the burgee to fly a yacht club or other identifying flag from the top of the mast.
Rahila is a camel used for transporting loads. Ba'ir is used for camels in general.
That horizontal appendage projecting from the right side of the breastplate is the lance rest. The shoulders are covered by the pauldrons. The arms, including the upper, lower arm, and bend of the elbow, are covered by the vambraces, the left and right vambrace. And so we have a topping lift to hold up the end of the pole. We have a halyard and a downhaul on the butt of the pole to raise and lower it on the track on the mast. The shield is known as the escutcheon. And the steel-covered shoe is known as the sabaton.
What do you call these camels?
Well, I call them Pete, Jess, Tom, Joe, Jerry, and Billy.
The
Czech word for ostrich is Strauss.
Down.
Grody.
Elliptical.
Lunch.
We just have a word for it, so we can talk about it.
Roughly speaking, the achievement of language is to provide a form of words that allows us to say anything we can think.
You can make all kinds of statements about conditions as you wish them to be, conditions as they might be, conditions as they were once upon a time, or conditions as they will be in the future. An animal cannot make this kind of statement, because this kind of statement is possible only by means of language.
Consider, for example, negation, right? It's easy to tell somebody that it's not going to rain. Try drawing them a picture of it's not going to rain. Or try drawing them a picture of, if I had let the hammer go, it would have fallen on my toe.
In language, you can say, if we drop this piano, it's not going to play Polonaise.
Think about trying to draw a picture of there's not a giraffe standing beside me.
Here we are communicating about a world of our imagination. Imagination, if you like, is also a human construct.
The edge that language gave us, that no other animal has, no other being has, is the ability to think abstractly. That's really what language can do for us. We seem to have this drive to think abstractly. We're propelled to do it. It's not even a choice. Because language itself is abstract, we seem to be led to think abstractly. Because we can think abstractly, we don't have to talk about what's in our immediate physical environment. We can plan for the future. We can create art. We can create complex social organizations. All of these things are possible because we can think abstractly.
Since my house burned down, I now have a better view of the rising moon.
Language, like any complex human phenomenon, can be studied from many different points of view. And contemporary linguists specialize. Some like to study words and their structures and see how the structures of words affect sentences. Some say the place to go is to work on the structure of sentences and worry later about what the words mean. Some people say unless you look at the role of language in conversations, in stories, and longer stretches of discourse, you'll never really understand what language is about. Now, in a sense, of course, they're all right.
We can't cut open the brain and look at structures that are involved in visual perception or in memory. But we do have language. We do have something almost physical. We have the record of what people say, and we can analyze that as data. So linguistics provides us with the most accessible window into the human mind.
We have this remarkable system that allows us to choose a form of words corresponding to the thought that we want to express. And somehow it's a system we manage to learn within a very short period of time if we're a child in a language community, and that we manage to access, to exploit, both from the point of view of the speaker and from the point of view of the hearer, instantaneously, easily, unconsciously, with no sense of effort.
So if you wanted to ask, what's the answer to the question? Is language simple or is language complex? It's simple for those creatures who use it. That is, the human brain is naturally evolved so that it uses a system of this apparently complex sort in a very simple way.
If a child is in an environment in which language interactions are proceeding, that language will grow in the child's mind, very much in the manner of other aspects of physical growth.
I take it as the current task of linguistics to ask the question about language, how much of it is built in and in what way, and how much of it is and must be learned by exposure to the environment of speaking people.
Essa questão será tratada no próximo programa desta série sobre a linguagem humana. Como é que as crianças adquirem uma língua sem aparente aprendizagem? Veja na segunda parte o jogo da linguagem.
by imitating their mothers and the people around them?
I guess their parents teach them, people around them.
Children learn language from their parents, or who's ever rearing them or raising them.
Yes, I think that a baby would imitate what he hears, yes.
Esta é a segunda parte de uma série sobre a linguagem humana. Como é que as crianças adquirem a linguagem sem que aparentemente tenham de aprendê-la?
In advance of experience, the child is already equipped with an understanding of the basic structure of any human language.
Show me your gumlo. Now go gum. Okay, go.
At the age of 3, there are many things a child can't do. Can't perform mathematical operations like multiplication or division or even subtraction.
But it only takes a short amount of time to get a kid to be a member of a language community, such that he can infer reliably from the noises that people make to their states of mind. How on earth does he do it?
Either it's there at birth or he has to learn it. Now, do birds teach their young to fly? Do mothers teach their children how to speak? Well, I really don't know whether birds teach their young to fly or not, though I suspect not. But I'm certain that mothers don't teach their children to talk.
Esta parte da nossa série trata de um enorme mistério. Como é que as crianças adquirem a linguagem sem que aparentemente tenham de aprendê-la? Como é que sabem tantas coisas com tão pouca experiência em que possam basear-se? Platão já colocava o problema há 2000 anos. Como é que as crianças sabem andar a correr? E pegar em objetos com os dedos? E como utilizar a gramática sem esforço e sem lições? Como conseguem tudo isto? As abordagens ao problema de Platão levaram uma grande volta em anos recentes. E os linguistas atribuem o crédito da revisão do problema, uma revisão que os influenciou profundamente, a Noam Chomsky.
Well, there is a general view that learning language is just like solving any other problem. That we have certain general ways of solving problems, call them mechanisms of general intelligence. We apply them to this task, to that task, to the other task. It's the same mechanisms. One of the problems is acquiring language. There's another approach which suggests that, that in fact the brain is like every other system in the biological world. That is, it's highly differentiated into subsystems of special design and structure, and that one of these happens to have a special design for acquiring language.
Chomsky has argued, to my mind convincingly, that many of the processes of mental computation involved in the normal use of language are inherited. You're born with them. They're in your genetic makeup. Coded in the DNA, the way it's coded in the DNA of a human being that he's going to develop arms instead of wings.
And then if it's, as it were, coded in the genes, it's not surprising that we're all good at it. It's like we're all good at having hair or something. Having two arms, as Chomsky likes to say.
Walking is presumably encoded in your DNA. It's part of the innate program of human beings in their development that they're going to learn to walk and not learn to fly. And perhaps not learn to climb very well. But they'll learn to walk terrifically well.
We are designed to walk. It's actually an open question to what extent a child has to be in an environment of walking people in order to walk. But that we are designed to walk is certain. That we are taught to walk is impossible. And pretty much the same is true of language. Nobody's taught language. In fact, you can't prevent a child from learning it. It's probably a mistake to even use the word learning in connection with language acquisition. as far as we understand it, it has very much the properties of normal physical growth.
So much of the what's called controversy about Chomsky's approach appears to arise from people's belief that they have to man this barricade on one side or the other. Either language is built in, as birdsong, let us say, is built in, or it is wholly learned from exposure to specific properties of the environment. Why can't it be both? In fact, I take it that this is the question of modern linguistics. How much of language does a child have to learn? And how much is built in?
Gilles de Villiers, do Smith College, já demonstrou que as crianças sabem mais do que geralmente supomos.
Here's a story about a boy who loved to climb trees in the forest. But one afternoon he slipped and fell to the ground. That night when he had a bath, he found a big bruise on his arm. He said to his dad, "I must have hurt myself when I fell this afternoon." When did the boy say he hurt himself?
Climbed up a tree.
Oh, right, he did.
When he was taking a bath.
When he was taking a bath.
In the bathtub.
In the bathtub,
When he fell down from the tree.
That's right. When did the boy say he hurt himself?
When he fell. When he fell this afternoon. Any other possibilities? In the bathtub.
In the bathtub. There are two possibilities. Well, he said it in the bathtub, and he hurt himself in the afternoon. That night when he had a bath, he found a big bruise on his arm. He said to his dad, "I must have hurt myself when I fell this afternoon." When did the boy say how he hurt himself?
In the bathtub. And when he was bath.
When he was in the bath, you're right. So where's the other answer? When did the boy say how he hurt himself? Why isn't it when he fell out the tree that afternoon?
Could you give us the two again, side by side?
When did the boy say he hurt himself? When did the boy say how he hurt himself? The presence of that middle question, how, seems to block one of the interpretations. This is not the kind of sentence anybody has ever taught them about. They haven't had lessons sitting down with their parents saying, "No, no, no, you misinterpreted what I meant this."
I would think that the child would have to already have some kind of knowledge of grammar and syntactical structure.
This is the claim. When did the boy say how he hurt himself?
When he was taking a bath.
A teoria de que a linguagem vem por imitação opõe-se à que sustenta que ela é inata.
Now listen, I'm going to teach you to say something very important. It might be the most important word you ever learned, okay? And that word is Ernie. Okay? Go ahead, say it. Say Ernie.
People often ask, what's the big problem about a child learning grammar? Doesn't the child just imitate what he or she hears, get reinforced one way or another, and end up knowing the language?
Okay, listen. Here's knee, 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 knee. Now you just say knee, okay?
Our common sense theory about how children learn to talk is that they listen to their parents and they imitate their parents.
But every child, like every adult, can produce brand new sentences that child has never heard before and never produced before.
I hate you, Mommy. Now, come on. You didn't learn this from your mother.
You just have to listen to a 3-year-old for a few minutes to realize that they're not simply imitating what they hear from their parents. I've heard children say things like, "Stop giggling me," or "My teacher holded the baby rabbits," or "My nose is crying," when the child's nose is running, or "I'm barefoot all over."
It's a very funny sort of imitation.
Now, Ernestine, look, watch. Knee. Ernie. Oh, well.
Hi, Ernie.
Hi, Bert.
Se não é pela imitação que aprendemos, então como é? Um dos mais fortes argumentos dos linguistas é que a aquisição da linguagem é diferente de outros processos de aprendizagem. Parece que não aprendemos a linguagem da mesma forma que aprendemos outras tarefas difíceis.
With learning how to ride a bicycle, we all remember being told how to get on it, falling off. We even had training wheels, but we never give training wheels when we're learning language. In fact, what we know is that when mothers try and help their children learn language by making it simpler, the children systematically ignore the information that's being given to them.
I don't know why he says pajamas. I mean jamamas, because I say pajamas, right?
Jamamas.
Jamamas? What about pajamas? Can you say pajamas?
Jamamas.
We come to cherish our children's errors, rare as they are. They're so cute.
When my little girl would say she wanted to make wee-wee, I would say the word is urinate. Urinate, I said. The word is urinate. Urinate, dear. I'm in it.
We know that some mothers correct their children, but we also know that not all mothers do. And we know that all children learn to speak.
It doesn't seem to matter how many times I correct him. He still says jamamas. He likes that word.
Jamamas.
Mothers are important because they provide a lot of the data. Kid makes a noise and the mother expands on it and that sort of thing. But children don't copy what's done around them. They acquire language by being surrounded by it, immersed in it all the time.
O filósofo Wittgenstein afirmou que as crianças adquirem a fala através do jogo da linguagem, um jogo no qual, ao que parece, as mães imitam os seus bebés.
Ready? Okay.
O Sami tem 3 anos e meio. Quanta gramática é que ele já sabe?
Ask the rat what he thinks. What do you think Cookie Monster eats?
What?
What do you think Cookie Monster eats?
Oh, I think Cookie Monster eats maybe pizza? Goodness, try again. So maybe he likes to eat cookies.
Cookies and what else?
Ice cream? Well, that's a tough one, Sammy.
I'll give you a guess, or I'll give you a hint.
Okay.
It starts with a K.
Oh, it spells with a K.
What do you think Cookie Monster eats?
With a K? Maybe cake.
Right!
Okay.
Great.
Cookie. What do you think Cookie Monster eats? It's really rather remarkable that such a young child can produce such a complicated sentence. This is a complex sentence that has one sentence inside another. Cookie Monster eats something inside the larger sentence. You think Cookie Monster eats something. Then it's been changed into a question. And the way it's changed into a question is something is changed into what. And then what is displaced from the very end of this long sentence to the very beginning. But the child was able to do it unerringly. Now, it has been thought for a while that children take 5, 8, 10, 12 years to learn their syntax, to learn how to produce such complicated sentences. But experiments like these seem to indicate that a child was able to produce this very complicated sentence at an age when he has difficulty tying his shoes.
Just do the bow part for me, would you, Sammy?
One more?
Yeah, one more bow.
Any 4-year-old can pull it off with almost the facility that any 34-year-old can. It's quite a remarkable achievement, and one which comes intuitively, naturally, unconsciously. Nothing troubles us about it.
No matter how young you investigate them, they seem to get all of these fundamental syntactic things right.
And nobody can teach that to the child. I think that's one of Chomsky's most powerful arguments, This is something the child has to figure out on his own or on her own.
Chomsky is often misunderstood as claiming that all of language is innate. Now, I would go so far as to say that most of language is innate. That is, much of what you know when you know a language you couldn't possibly have learned because you never had evidence for it, you never had training in it, but surely you don't inherit all of it.
Certainly nobody is saying that French is innate or Spanish is innate. I mean, there is no argument of this sort. There's a sense in which language is obviously learned from specific facts in the surrounding environment.
The environment certainly has an effect. So, for example, I'm talking English, I'm not talking Japanese, and that's because I grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, not in northeastern Tokyo.
So experience is certainly relevant. What Chomsky has shown is that there's much beyond experience that's relevant. That is, much of what you know when you know a language you had no experience for, couldn't possibly have learned.
A handsome prince came, and a little girl came out and laid on the couch, and a big girl came out, and she had a thing around here, and she took it off and put it on laid it on a girl.
The child is able to say sentences that he or she has never heard before.
And then she...
Well, how could this be done?
And then she walked around and she saw a handsome prince, and then snow came down.
It could not be, there being so many sentences, that the child has just heard all of these sentences and memorized them.
And then we went in and watched the movie.
There is a traditional semi-answer to this, and that is we do it by analogy. New sentences are like the ones we've heard before, and that's how we understand them. Well, let's have a look at that.
So suppose we assume the child has heard the sentence, I painted the red barn. So now by analogy, the child can say, I painted a blue barn. That's exactly the kind of theory that we want. You hear a sample and you extend it to all of the new cases by similarity. That's the right theory. In addition to, I painted a red barn, you may also hear the sentence, I painted a barn red. So it looks as if you can take those last two words and switch them around in their order. That sounds good. So now you want to extend this to the case of seeing, because now you want to look at barns instead of painting them. So you have heard, I saw a red barn. So now you try, new sentence, I saw a barn red. I saw a red barn. I saw a barn red. Alarm! Something's gone wrong. This is an analogy, but the analogy didn't work. It's not a sentence of any.
Even from these simple examples, we can see at once that concepts like analogy are not going to do very much work. In fact, there is no one has ever proposed a concept of analogy that doesn't break down at once under investigation. In fact, these examples show us that some kind of mental computation is going on that is providing rather surprising results. Suppose that a child has learned to understand the word eat. He knows that somebody does the eating, something gets eaten. He understands John ate an apple. He's now faced with John ate. Well, the child understands that. He or she knows that John ate means John ate something or other.
Taro ate a sandwich. But suppose that he hadn't eaten his sandwich. Suppose that he ate his shoe. Taro ate his shoe. Or Taro ate his hat. It's a funny thing to do, but a perfectly normal thing to say, if that's what Taro did. But now, you can't say Taro ate. Taro ate means he ate a sandwich, or he ate breakfast, or lunch, or something normal. Not his shoe, or his hat, or his words. Taro ate. But he didn't eat his shoe. How do I know that? How does any speaker of English know that? That Taro ate doesn't mean that he ate his shoe.
Now let's extend that by analogy to new utterances.
Now suppose Taro's a farmer.
Suppose the same child hears the sentence, John grows tomatoes. and knows that growing is something that a person can do when something gets grown, so that's just like John eats an apple. And now suppose tomatoes is dropped. So we have John grows. Well, now the sentence does not mean John grows something or other, but I don't know what. In fact, John grows means something totally different.
Doesn't mean the same thing at all.
John is undergoing some sort of a development. Now here the analogy is wildly broken, yet we all do this instantaneously, without training, without experience, and in a way which is based on principles that are quite common to the human species and underlie our very understanding of language.
Pretend you're sick, okay? I gotta call the doctor. I'll call the doctor.
We might ask how old a child has to be before he begins to appreciate something of the grammar of his native tongue.
Told you, give him some medicine. Come on.
When does he know about ideas like subjects of the sentence and objects of the sentence? When does he know the difference between the horse kicked the cow and the cow kicked the horse? That the subject is the one who did the kicking and the object is the one that got kicked.
Na Temple University fazem-se experiências que tentam determinar a partir de que idade a criança percebe essa diferença.
Where's Big Bird? Find Big Bird.
Huh?
Where's Cookie Monster? Find Cookie Monster. Where's Big Bird?
We present two films, one on the left screen and one on the right screen.
Mama.
Then we simply ask the child through a centralized speaker,
Where's Cookie Monster washing Big Bird? Find Cookie Monster washing Big Bird.
So the question behind all our studies is, will the child look more at the screen that matches the language that they're hearing?
Look, Big Bird's feeding Cookie Monster. Find Big Bird feeding Cookie Monster.
Ma.
The remarkable thing is that some of these children who are only 16 months old and who have only 2 words in their productive vocabularies, nonetheless are understanding the order of the information as it comes in our sentences.
That is, that Cookie Monster is doing the action and he's in the first position in the sentence, and Big Bird is receiving the action and he's in the second position in the sentence.
See, Big Bird tickling Cookie Monster.
Word order is one of the 2 devices that languages all over the world seem to use to map the objects and events that are going on in the world, which is a very important part of grammar and may in fact be telling us that these young children have syntax.
I think it makes very good sense to think of language as essentially an organ of the mind. And bear in mind that when we use the word mind, we're simply talking about the brain at some abstract level. Now, remember, when a child learns a language, the child is basically creating the language. The language is growing in the child's mind.
Mas será isto aplicável às palavras? Certamente as palavras não existem já na mente da criança. Contudo, é tal a facilidade com que aprendemos que somos levados a cogitar se o cérebro não auxiliará o processo.
The problem is how the child learns the meanings of words. Seems like a simple problem, and I suppose it is a simple problem from the point of view of a child. The mother points to something in the world, let's say the car that's going by there, and says, car. So the child says, aha, the word car in English must mean car. The trouble is that can't be the whole story.
When my son was little, we had a dog called Nunu. This is his successor, Freud. And Nunu was a wonderful dog, very different from Freud. She had hair all over her face and 2 black, shiny nostrils stuck out from the middle of it. Nicholas loved Nunu. He liked to poke his fingers in her nostrils. And as linguists, we were convinced that Nunu would be his first word. It had the right structure to it, 2 reduplicated syllables. And sure enough, Nunu was Nicholas's first word.
But on the very same day, he pointed to a picture of a golden cocker spaniel on a photograph, and he said Nunu, very different from our own dog. So perhaps the word meant dog in general. But no, the very next day he pointed to a black and white cow and said Nunu. So we thought maybe it means animal in general. But then we were in a shop and he saw some pink furry slippers, like these ones. And he felt the slipper, felt how soft it was, and he said Nunu. Now what does the word mean? Well then, we were in a restaurant and our salad was served. And Nicholas took one look at it and said, Nunu. And then he actually ate one of the olives.
The question was, when he said Nunu, what did he mean?
The trick in learning a word meaning is not so much using it to apply to that which you saw it applied to, but using it in the future to apply to new things. So the child who was introduced to Fido and told, this is a dog, not only has to use the word dog to refer to Fido, but he has to know it applies to Rex, it applies to Spot, it doesn't apply to Felix.
Como é que cão sabe que outro animal é cão?
Words, after all, have meaning. They're signs. So maybe what we want to say is that a word is something that stands for a concept. But then we have another question. What's a concept? Take a word like house. That seems pretty simple. You ask a 5-year-old to draw a picture of a house, and most of them will give you the same square thing with a chimney and a couple of doors and that kind of stuff. So you'd say, okay, that's a house. But then if you think about the concept, if you start worrying to yourself, all right, what does somebody have in their head? Is the meaning of a house in my head different from the meaning of house in that Chinese person's head who lives in a cave?
A simple homely item, a clothespin. What else is a clothespin after you learn this word? Well, how about that? Is that a clothespin? In some ways, it's very much more like this object than that one is. To understand what the problem of word meaning is, you have to understand how the child picks out a category of things which are relevantly alike.
O cão está vivo. O conceito de vivo é igual para toda a gente? Os nossos conceitos alteram-se à medida que crescemos.
What does the word alive mean? Are dogs alive?
Yes.
How come?
Because there's eyes and mouth and teeth and tongue, and there's a wagging tail.
Wagging tail, okay.
Bark.
How about a worm? Is a worm alive?
Yes.
Does a worm have legs?
No. No.
Does it have teeth?
No.
Well, then how come a worm is alive?
Because it moves.
Okay. Well, then how about a car? Is a car alive?
No. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because it moves.
What do you think?
I think it's alive too.
A que se refere outra pessoa quando nos diz uma palavra? Como é que o sabemos? Na Universidade de Harvard, o filósofo W. Quine lançou uma questão conhecida como o problema Gavagai. Suponhamos que estamos num lugar que desconhecemos por completo. Ao nosso lado está um homem. Não sabemos que língua fala. Nesse momento passa um coelho e o homem exclama Gavagai. O que é que ele quer dizer?
What do you think I mean? Gavagai. Blue rabbit.
Blue rabbit.
If you pretend that you can't understand my language at all, and I point up there and I say, Gavagai, what do you think I mean by that?
could be animal, physical object, hippity-hop.
Gavagai.
Rabbit.
The only evidence is that it's appropriate to announce gavagai in the presence of a rabbit, but the rabbit is present only when rabbit parts are present, provided they're undetached rabbit parts. Furthermore, a rabbit is present only when the abstract attribute of rabbithood is manifested. But the abstract property of rabbithood is quite another thing from rabbits.
How do you know that I didn't mean ears?
All of these ideas apparently don't come to the child's mind. What comes to his mind is a rabbit. And the question is how this could be.
Para que uma criança aprenda o significado de uma palavra, ser-lhe-iam úteis certas premissas e expectativas herdadas. Quais são elas?
Have you ever seen one of these before?
O que será pressuposto inato?
Well, this here is called a flimmick.
How you do that?
It's called a flimmick.
Can I try one of them?
Now, what do you think this is called?
Flimmick.
Oh, wait, this one's open and that one's closed. So that can't be a flimmick. What do you think it is? Yeah.
Children are biased learners. They're not open-mindedly considering all the possible hypotheses about what a word could mean and waiting for the evidence to come in. One of the assumptions that they make about words, what words could mean, is they start out expecting object labels to refer to the whole object. So when someone points to an object and says, "See the dog,"
Can you put the dog in there?
they start out expecting that a label will refer to the whole object, not to its part, not to its substance, not to its color, shape, size, and so forth. Where's the ball? Put the ball in there. They expect the label that they hear to refer to the object as a whole.
Vejamos outras premissas instintivas.
Hand me the spud.
This one.
Why do you think that's the spud?
Well, I think because it looks like it.
Yeah, it looks like a spud. That's a good answer.
Children expect objects to have one and only one label. Children expect an object to have one and only one name.
If the child already knows that that's called a flimmick, and he's asked to point to the spud, he can easily pick this object out because he knows that can't be a spud because it's a flimmick, and if it's a flimmick, it's not a spud.
Lemon. Lemon.
Flimmicks.
Words seem to be learned one by one, just what a common sense idea might be.
Aminal.
You learn language by learning an item, perhaps by explicit instruction, and in effect memorize them.
Aminal.
To a large extent, I would say, words might well be learned that way.
Animal.
Sentences surely aren't learned that way.
My birthday.
When you want to use a sentence, you're surely creating something new. And when you understand a sentence that somebody else utters, you're really participating in an act of creation.
Each summer, I go to Puerto Rico, and my grandma lives there. But before, she used to live in Miami, and she had a dog, and it was named Pepper.
You've got a finite number of words. You've got a very small number of rules. And together, you can use them to make up an infinite number of sentences. That's the system.
And it's a toy store and an ice cream store.
The richness of the concepts that we employ and the minimal character of the evidence on which we've derived them essentially leaves no alternative but to believe that these concepts are available prior to experience and we're simply selecting them out of a store. And that means that in effect we're sort of born with them.
Se essa teoria está correta, se os humanos têm uma linguagem comum à espécie, deveríamos vê-la ser utilizada nos locais mais recônditos, tais como a Papua Nova Guiné. Nessa ilha têm vivido muitas tribos com culturas diversas, todas elas isoladas do resto do mundo desde eras remotas. O que terão as línguas dessas tribos em comum com as nossas?
This region, Melanesia, contains 0.1% of the world's population and about 20% of the world's languages. There's nothing like this country in the world linguistically. This country has 750 different languages spoken by 3 million people. Some of them are as different as English from French, some of them as different as French from Chinese.
The Menya people have never written their language. They've never invented the wheel. But they speak a language that has as complicated a grammar and discourse structure as any other language in the world.
Carl Whitehead, de Manchester, na Inglaterra, vive aqui com a família há 10 anos. Segundo diz, para completar o seu estudo da língua Menya, poderá precisar de outros 10.
The single most remarkable feature of the Menya language is the verb system. Most of its verbs can have anywhere between 2,000 and 3,000 different forms. That compares to English, where a verb can have up to 5 forms. It has a very complex modal system. That is, whereas English talks of I may go, I can go, I should go, I will go, Menya collapses all that into a single word and has about 14 different ways of referring to an event that hasn't happened yet, but that could or that will or should happen sometime in the future. That's the genius of Menya.
When we start looking cross-linguistically, we find great universals. We don't find dozens or hundreds of different ways of building a human language. We find a very small set of possibilities. One possibility has to do with the position of the verb. You can put the verb at the beginning, the middle, or the end.
The Menya verb, ariri, can have many different meanings depending on its context. It doesn't occur by itself, so by itself it is meaningless. It's the noun in combination with the verb ariri that has a specific meaning. So, for example, a chingariri means she is washing. Ngariri, he is crying. Pariri, he's rubbing mud on his face. Tagnariri, he's building a fence. Tiariri, it is raining. And there's a couple of poetic ones that I really like. The first one is referring to an aura around the moon, Hangwa Tagnariri, which literally means the moon is building a fence. Hangwa Tagnariri. And the other one refers to a special kind of sunset when the whole ground just lights up with a bright orange glow. And the expression is, which literally means the sun is painting the ground red.
The reasonable first guess from all observers is that languages are utterly different from each other.
There are 5,000, maybe more than 5,000 languages spoken in the world. And if you're studying a foreign language, what you notice is how different that language is from the one that you speak. Of course, what you notice are the differences. But in fact, what Chomsky noticed is that these 5,000 languages of the world are really very, very similar.
Que juegue ahora, que juegue. Que juegue, coño.
You could even consider the 5,000 so-called languages that are spoken on this planet to be all dialects of one language, human language.
was a tremendous change in the research program for linguistics right around the turn of the 20th century. And the leading figure in this change was a Swiss linguist named Ferdinand de Saussure. Saussure thought of languages very much like chess games, that each language has a set of pieces, namely the building blocks of the language, the words, the sounds, and they were put together by different rules. Different languages, of course, have different rules. Interestingly, Saussure discovered every language has rules. There are no languages that are so primitive, for example, that they don't have any rules at all.
There's no such thing as a primitive language, or a primitive people for that matter.
And that was an important discovery, because before the beginning of the 20th century, people talked freely about primitive languages. What Saussure and the people who worked around him said was, no, every language has rules.
Isso acontecerá com todas as línguas e em toda a parte? A ilha de São Lourenço, no mar de Bering, é um dos derradeiros redutos de uma língua designada esquimó e upique da Sibéria. Pensou-se muito tempo que tinha regras complexas, inteiramente diversas de todas as outras línguas. Contudo, após uma análise mais apurada, verifica-se que até o esquimó é menos bizarro do que soa. Dos peritos na língua é uma natural da ilha, Darlendor.
The people here on St. Lawrence Island speak Siberian Yupik, and it is also spoken on the other side, and that's in the Siberian part. It's the only indigenous language to the Old World and to the New, spoken by non-colonial peoples.
One language, the verb might go in one place. In another language, the sound might pattern this way, but in another language in a different way. But every language has rules.
And that means, were you trying to call him?
There are two major ground plans, two great options in building a language. Relying on the order of words to convey the meaning of your overall thought, or changing the endings of the words one by one and then shuffling them around.
The reason this word looks so long is because Siberian Yupik Eskimo relies heavily on suffixation, using suffixes in a word. There are no prefixes or infixes in Siberian Yupik, and linguists speculate that this is probably the most inflected language in the world, which means that it could have multitudes of suffixes for endings. But this part means being acted upon. This much here means without, and the last part means us. So the whole word means without us being sprayed upon by water when you're traveling in a boat.
Children seem to love rules. And it's this kind of phenomenon, the fact that children seem to love rule-making, that has led many people to propose that there's something special about the learning of grammar. That children essentially come pre-programmed, perhaps with some innate ideas about the forms that languages will take.
In advance of experience, the child is already equipped with an understanding of the basic structure of any human language. So we know, even in advance of inquiry, that there's going to be a fundamental invariant core to language.
Linguists have come to use the term universal grammar. It's a notion that there's some underlying set of characteristics that are true of all languages all over the world.
All human languages have something that is sort of nouny and something that is sort of verby. They all do.
All human languages have a way to make things negative.
No way, Jose.
No way, Jose.
All human languages have a way to ask a question.
If I'm asking a question, I'll lower my eyebrows. Where are you from? What's your name? Who is that person?
All human languages have a way to indicate a difference between just one and more than one.
In the Eskimo languages, you have not only the singular, for example, ugaik, one rabbit, ugaik, two rabbits, ugait, three or more rabbits.
And so it goes. Each language has a list of obligatory distinctions. Male, female, definite, indefinite, singular, plural, past, present. This is the stock of categories that the human mind uses to schematize experience.
And Chomsky asked the question, why is this? Why are languages so similar? Why are they all cut from the same mold? And his answer was,
there are fixed invariant principles, fixed invariant structural principles, which are simply part of the human biological endowment and that determine what counts as a human language.
It's because the human brain is pre-wired to accept only certain kinds of languages, and that the grammatical properties of the languages of the world have those properties that they do because the human mind has those properties.
Those things which are true of all languages are the candidates for what the child comes into the world knowing about the nature of the language to which he is being exposed.
The child might very well have a plan for what is a possible rule in a human language. So languages can have verbs then objects or objects then verbs, but those are two possibilities that every language has one or the other of. And the child can simply worry about which of those two versions his language has. What he's got to pick up are the particular versions of the rules that everyone else in the community is using.
You have this one, you have this one, you have this one, you have this one. Everybody got their pictures? What did your person do before they went to school?
I drive to school.
He did what?
I drive.
Drive to school?
Children are designed in such a way to look for rules in the data around them. They're very good at finding rules that are there, and they're very good at even overgeneralizing these rules.
What's going overhead?
Jesus.
We find everywhere that children take the irregular patterns of their language and try to make them as regular as possible. So just like English-speaking children will say things like 2 foot instead of 2 feet, or it braked instead of it broke, children in every language will fill in the missing gaps, fill in the errors, and try to make the language follow a system. They have a clear sense of system.
We find that deaf children of deaf parents begin to learn first words and then begin to learn the grammar at the same age as hearing children learning spoken language. And in so doing, we find they make the same kinds of mistakes or overgeneralizations, showing that, in fact, they're extracting out the rules of the language. So if you want to sign, this is duck. If you want to sign 2 ducks, you probably say 2 duck. But a deaf baby instead will overgeneralize and sign 2 ducks like this.
So they're looking for some deep principles. They follow these deep principles. If the language chooses to violate those principles now and then, the children seem to say, so much the worse for the language.
Ruth says that they're foots. I say that they're feet. What do you say they are?
I say they're foot.
But there are certain kinds of mistakes that children never seem to make, even when it seems very reasonable that they might make a mistake.
Children will be able to ask questions like, what did you eat your eggs with? But no child has ever asked the question, what did you eat your eggs and? Even though that's a straightforward extension of, I ate ham and eggs. Children will hear, I baked a cake for Mary. I baked Mary a cake. They'll hear, I painted the house for 6 hours. They'll never say, I painted 6 hours the house. Why don't children make these errors? They're perfectly logical. It's very hard to figure out on the basis of what the various sentences look like why the child wouldn't make these obvious leaps. If you can say, what did you eat eggs with? Why can't you say, what did you eat eggs and?
when we imagine a reasonable sort of mistake for a child to make, but never find a child making it, we assume that the mistake would violate some principle or rule of universal grammar. Universal grammar is what the child already knew and doesn't have to learn.
What's in here?
Ask him what he thinks.
What do you think what's in here?
Well, that sounded to me like monster heads.
No!
No.
That's silly.
I know. M&M's.
What do you think what's in here?
Right.
Oh, great.
An adult would say, what do you think is in here? But Sam said,
What do you think what's in here?
it's not just a random error. It's not putting the words together in any old way. Rather, it's a mistake that's actually a rule of a number of other languages. For example, in certain dialects of German, exactly the way you would ask this question is by repeating the what. It just doesn't happen to be the syntactic rule of English.
What do you think what's in here?
He's not born knowing the grammar of English, but what he knows is that languages will fall into these classes, and he won't step outside those classes and create some novel language that couldn't be a human language.
Dad, stop playing. Stop calling me.
No.
If we weren't so familiar with them, we'd realize that 3-year-olds are among the most exotic creatures on the planet. We usually don't think of them as terribly competent intellectually. We don't let them drive or vote. It's hard to teach them long division. But think about what a 3-year-old has done when he's learned how to talk. Hasn't gotten any lessons. All he's done is listen to other people talk. He makes very few errors and unlearns them without having to have been corrected. There are countless logical, tempting errors that he never makes. And in less than 2 years, he's developed the ability to express an infinite variety of brand new thoughts into words in a way that other people know exactly what he's thinking.
There are a number of quite striking conclusions, general conclusions that we arrive at as a result of this study, even with our present partial knowledge. One is a kind of awe at the intricacy and complexity of the mind and its resources. The structures of language that the child automatically constructs on the basis of extremely sparse evidence. A second conclusion is that these intricate, subtle resources must be shared across the species. Since the systems of thought and expression that the child's mind develops are only barely hinted at by the experience available, they must be deriving from the child's mind, but the child's mind is the same whether the child is going to be exposed to one culture or another, and correspondingly it must be that at their core the cultural products, including language, are very similar and in fact rooted ultimately in human biology.
From what we've observed of children learning different languages around the world, it seems to us that the capacity to learn language is deeply ingrained in us as a species, just as the capacity to walk, to grasp objects, to recognize faces. We don't find any serious differences in children growing up in congested urban slums, in isolated mountain villages, or in privileged suburban villas.
Children who are abused and mistreated and unmotivated, if they can't hear, language filters out through their fingers. Almost no matter what the circumstances, the language bubbles up.
It seems inescapable. Children aren't learning